Hello, everyone. Thank you for waiting a few minutes for everyone to join. I think we waited long enough, and I think we're ready to begin.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this information session and Q&A about the Prince Claus Seed Awards. My name is Tessa Giller. I'm head of programs at the Prince Claus Fund, and I'm joined here today by my colleague Emma, who is a program coordinator. In this session today, we'll be walking you through the details and application process of the Seed Awards. And to start off, we have a few technical practicalities. So this event is recorded and will be accessible on our social media channels in the future. And after the live event, we'll also add subtitles to the recording. So for anybody who needs them, please do make sure to check out our social media in the coming days. Some of you have already submitted questions in advance, and we'll try and answer these as much as we can as we go through the presentation. For very specific questions that we'll receive, we'll make sure to get back to you through email. And please also do feel free to submit any questions that come up during the presentation. You can do so here in the Zoom Q&A function or in the Facebook chat, and we'll come back to those and answer them when we get to the Q&A. So I'm going to start us off today with a very short introduction of who we are as an organization. The Prince Claus Fund is an arts and culture fund that was set up almost 30 years ago from the conviction that culture is a basic need. With this, we mean that everybody should have the right to participate in cultural activities and to express themselves through the arts. Since 1996, we've provided funding in places where access to support is limited and the arts and culture are under pressure. We work with artists and cultural practitioners in the majority of countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, and Eastern Europe. You can find a full list of our eligible countries on our website, and we'll also share the link here in the chat. So when we talk about arts and culture, we really mean this in the very broadest sense of the term. We support a very wide range of disciplines, from theatre to performance arts, literature, visual arts, and journalism, and very many interdisciplinary practices as well. For us, the factor that's more important than discipline is the transformative power of culture, meaning that the practices we support are all socially, politically, or critically engaged. The individuals we work with put forward new perspectives, they create space for dialogue through their work, and aim to positively benefit their communities. So how do we offer this support? In our work, we support artists and cultural practitioners at different stages of their artistic careers. We do this through 3 awards. Firstly, the Seed Awards, for which, of course, we're here today, and which is focused at the first 5 years of an artist's career. And then the Mentorship Awards, through which we support more established artists to really deepen their practices by participating in one of our thematic mentorship programs. Finally, we have the Prince Claus Impact Award, which looks at supporting and recognizing artists who have a long-standing engagement throughout their work and who are really creating change at a slightly broader scale. With this cycle, we aim to contribute to the development of creative practices and enable space for growth and experimentation. You can find more about the Mentorship and Impact Awards on our website, and I would also encourage you to take a look at our YouTube, where you can find some of the inspiring stories of the people we work with in their own words. But of course, today we're here to discuss the Prince Claus Seed Awards, and for this, I'll hand over to our colleague Emma, who will take us through all the details. And do also stick around for the Q&A, because that's where we can get down into the nitty-gritty. Emma, back to you.
Thank you so much, Tessa, for the introduction. So as Tessa said, I will move on to talking a little bit more about why we're here, the Seed Awards. But before doing so, I will outline exactly what we'll talk about today. So I'll start by giving an explanation of what the Seed Awards are, followed by an explanation of the type of profile that we look for in a Seed awardee. And thereafter, if you match the profile, then we need to look at the eligibility criteria for the Seed Award application. And then we'll move on to learning more about what the contents of the application entail, and also share some tips and tricks on what makes a great application based on what we've seen in the previous years that we've held open calls for this award. Thereafter, we'll have a little bit of info about how to actually submit your application. And then we'll end with, I think, the reason that most of us are here, which is the Q&A segment. But as Tessa's highlighted, you can already start putting questions in the Q&A box that should be either at the bottom of your Zoom screen or at the top, and we'll address the questions at the end of the session. So let's get into it. The Seed Awards. Every year at the Prince Claus Fund, we grant 100 emerging artists a Seed Award in our annual open call for this award. And we look for artists who work in contexts in which culture is under pressure and create work that engages with the pressing social and political issues in their context. Each recipient of the award is granted €5,000, which they're free to invest as they choose, so long as this is aligned with developing their artistic practice. So let's talk about what sort of profile we look for when we're looking for our Seed Awards. We look for emerging artists and cultural practitioners. And as Tessa briefly mentioned, our definition of emerging artists and cultural practitioners is very broad. So if your work has an element of art or culture in it, it's likely that it would be eligible for a Seed Award. When we're looking for artists and cultural practitioners, we look for those who are in the first 5 years of their artistic or professional career. And we're really looking for people who have found their own voice in their work and are working with innovative and interesting artistic practices that are specifically addressing the social and political issues in their local context. And that context can be the community around you, it can be the city around you, the region or the country, but so long as it relates back to what you see around you in your everyday. And we're also looking for artists who up until now have received little to no recognition for their artistic and cultural practices. So if we talk about that criteria and you see that profile and you think, wow, I match that profile, there still are some eligibility criteria that we must check before we see if you're eligible for a Seed Award. And so one of the most important of these criteria is that the individuals who apply must be from, living in, and working in our eligible countries. So this is a three-pronged fork, and it's important that the "and" is really emphasized in the sentence because you must meet all these three criteria to be eligible for the Seed Award. As Tessa mentioned, we do offer unrestricted funding, and that largely allows the awardees to spend the award on whatever fits their artistic practice. However, we do need to highlight that the award does not cover tuition fees for participation in activities that focus on the academic sector. So that includes things like university programs or scholarships. And the award is also not intended for work that's purely developmental. We understand that a lot of work has a development aspect to it, and that's perfectly fine, but the development should be achieved through artistic and cultural practices. Unfortunately, if you've received an award from the Prince Claus Fund in the past, that means you are ineligible to apply for this open call. However, if you've received something like a mobility grant or a project grant in the past, you would still be eligible. So it's really if you've received an award from us in the past. And unfortunately, collectives, groups, and organizations are not eligible to apply because the Prince Claus Seed Awards are really for individuals and they're investing into their individual trajectory and their individual career. So we welcome applications from individuals. So if you still feel like you meet all of these criteria, then that's great. That means we can start talking about the contents of your application. So when you apply for the Seed Award, we ask for you to submit a completed application form, which includes your personal details. We also ask you to submit a pitch that answers the question, what drives you as an artist or a cultural practitioner? And we ask you to keep this to 3 minutes because we do review quite a few applications every year. We also ask for a reference letter, and we ask that this comes from somebody who you've worked with or who is familiar with your work. And we also ask for an up-to-date CV, as well as supporting materials that relate to your work. And some people have more supporting materials than others. If you do have more supporting materials than we allow for in the application, because we allow for 6 supporting materials, then we ask you to really look at the goals of the Seed Award and select the materials that you'd like to share that align with those goals. So if you've got all of those things together, you might think, what can I do to make my application stand out to increase my chances of being a successful applicant? And so based on some past Seed Awards, we have some tips and tricks for you to implement in your application. So we've really noticed that video and audio pitches in the answer to what drives you as an artist tend to be more successful in applications, merely because videos and audio pitches add a nice personal touch to the application, and they give us a chance to get to know you and yourself as an artist, as well as the way that you perceive your work. Of course, we realize that in some circumstances, it's not possible to submit a video or an audio pitch. And in that case, we really encourage you to send us an email and we'll talk about how we can submit a written pitch. So that's also perfectly fine. We've also noticed that work that is where the contextual relevance of the work is outlined tends to be more successful. So there's a lot of artists working on really amazing and pressing issues, for example, the climate crisis, and that's really valid, and we welcome those themes in applications. But what we noticed really takes an application over to being a great application is when you link these global issues back to your local context. So, for example, if you are working with the climate crisis, if you link that back to how it appears in your local context and then show how your work addresses those issues, those tend to be the applications that really stand out and are more successful. As well as this, the supporting material selection can be something that helps you stand out. And in the section, you can really add all sorts of supporting materials, whether it's a demo tape or your portfolio or a really nice article that someone has written about you and your work. You can decide what you'd like to add in this field. And as I said before, if it aligns with the goals of the Seed Awards, then that's something that can really help us to understand your motivation and why you as a candidate really stand out for this award. So if you've got all of that in tow, we'd say that you're pretty much ready to apply for the open call. And so to do so, you can create an account on a platform that we have as the Prince Claus, called the Prince Claus Awards platform, the link for which you can find on our website. Once you've opened the application form, you are asked to fill in all of the required fields and add all the required attachments. And what's really nice about the platform is that you can upload what you have until a certain point and save it and go back to the application platform later if you've gotten more documents or you've got another burst of energy to continue applying. And you can keep saving it until the moment that you are ready to submit it. And once you have submitted the application, then you'll receive an email confirmation saying that your submission has been received. If you don't receive this confirmation, we urge you to check your spam inbox. However, if you really look around and you can't find the confirmation, then you can always log back into the platform and check the status of your submission. And if the status is submitted, that means that your submission has been accepted, and that's great. However, if it is in progress, it means that you haven't submitted the application, in which case you should go back and submit it. But if you have difficulties doing so, you can also reach out to us via email and we'll try to help you submit the application. One thing we also want to highlight with the application is that we don't want you to leave it to the last minute, because we noticed that there's a lot of people running onto the platform in the last minute and uploading attachments and answering questions, and the platform gets really full and tends to act a lot slower. So documents that you might think upload quickly all of a sudden won't. So we really urge you to try and submit your application as soon as possible and not leave it to the last moment, because unfortunately, if things are still uploading when the deadline passes, your application will be considered incomplete and it won't be taken up for consideration. So please be mindful of this. So just to highlight, the deadline of the application is on the 23rd of February this year, just before midnight, Amsterdam time. Please also be sure to check the time difference between where you are and Amsterdam time, because we'd hate for your application not to be accepted purely because there was a time zone miscalculation. You'll be informed of the result of your application this year in August. And we'll begin with the kickoff of the Q&A now, but I also want to reiterate that we'll try to answer as many general questions as we get in this time. But if we don't get to your question, or if you have a really specific question, you can always email us on this email address that you see on the screen, awards@princeclausfund.nl, and we'll be happy to answer your questions as soon as possible in a more specific way. So with that, I think we're ready to kick off the Q&A section.
Perfect. We've already started getting quite a few questions in. So here from an anonymous asker, do applicants have to have a specific project to apply for the Seed Awards?
Yes, so in the Seed Award application, we ask a lot more about your work than a specific project. You can apply with a specific project, but you don't have to have a project in operation. You can also have the conception of a project or an ongoing project and apply. What's really important though, if you don't have a project that you're applying with, is to really provide supporting materials and also to provide answers that give us an impression of what your artistic practice entails, so that we can take this into consideration when assessing your application.
Perfect. We've also got a few questions about the CV. One person is asking, is it similar to the artistic portfolio, and what are the requirements for the CV?
So there's no hard and fast requirements for a CV. If ever you're looking for a format for a CV, there's quite useful resources online that you can look up templates for CVs. However, it doesn't need to follow a specific template. I would say that it differs a little bit from the average artistic portfolio, and that it's nice to get extra information about maybe your background in schooling or specific job positions that you've had, so maybe more specific in that sense. However, there isn't a strict template that we ask for. And if you have any questions about it, you can also always email us.
And then also quite a few questions about the reference letter. Is there any specific information that we need included in the reference? And are there any requirements like letterhead, stamps, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So in terms of the reference letter, again, it's not super strict on what we accept. However, it is nice that the referee, so the person writing the reference letter, explains their connection to you, so we can also get a little bit of a contextual insight into how you know each other. It's really nice if this person knows your work, or has worked with you in the past, so that they can give a little bit more insight into you as a practitioner. And what would be a really nice bonus is if they can also attest to how your work impacts the socio-political circumstances around you. That's also always nice to hear from someone else's mouth. So there aren't any requirements, but maybe these are things that could help your reference letter stand out a little bit. But in terms of format, it doesn't need to be a specifically formal letter.
Perfect. Then we have a few questions about eligible countries. So Car is asking, I wonder whether one can be from an eligible country and present a project that is set in a non-eligible country.
Yes. So as I said in the slide a few slides back, that for your Seed Awards application to be deemed eligible, you have to be living in, working in, and from an eligible country, which means that your work also needs to be in an eligible country. So unfortunately, if it's not in one, then you are not eligible for a Seed Award.
And then maybe a follow-up to that. Can somebody who is from but partly living or working in these eligible countries apply?
Yes, so technically you can apply. However, I would then make it very clear in the application how you divide your time between the two countries. And please be sure that one of those countries is on the eligible country list. If you explain how you divide your time between the two, then the external jury who assesses the applications will come to have a good understanding of how your project works. But please do note that we do notice a precedent for applicants whose work is entirely based in an eligible country. So be mindful of that when applying.
Could you elaborate on what we mean by developmental?
Yes, so this is a bit of a tricky question. Developmental work is work that I think relates a little bit more to the development field. We don't necessarily say no to work that has a developmental element to it. We're very open to developmental work, but as Tessa highlighted earlier, the work that we support is really to support cultural expression and cultural freedom. And so if your work also has a development benefit or a development side effect, that's fine. However, it should be achieved through culture or through art. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. Let's see. So we have a couple of questions on language. So maybe you could elaborate on what the language restrictions for the applications are.
Sure. I don't think I mentioned that in the presentation, so let me do it now. So the Seed Awards are unfortunately currently only limited to the English language in terms of the application. However, you can speak any language and still apply for a SEED award. What you need to be mindful of is that the answers to the fields in the application form are answered in English. If you don't speak English, there are quite a few translation tools online that can help you with that are also free. So for example, DeepL is one that I personally use, and you can input your text into that and it'll translate it into English, and you can use that to fill in the fields. For the supporting elements of your application, such as the pitch video, the what drives you as an artist question, you can submit that video or that audio in the language that you speak and subtitle it in English. And then for other supporting materials, such as a portfolio, or if someone's written an article about you, that can be in any language, and that's all fine.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Then we have some questions on the eligibility of what activities the award can be spent on. Could you give some examples of what we do allow?
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a really broad definition of art, and working with unrestricted funding also helps us support these broad definitions of art and various multidisciplinary forms as well. We do have a drop-down list in the application form of the type of work that we tend to support and the type of disciplines that we tend to support. And it really ranges from things that are more culturally inclined, like cultural managing and curatorship, to also things like photography and visual art, to also things like architecture and heritage. So it's quite a broad range. The list is in the application form. But definitely, if your work has some sort of artistic or cultural element to it, it's likely to be eligible for the award. Is there any other element that I need to answer to that question?
No, I think for now, I'll probably come across another one in these questions. Is adding a review important to the supporting materials?
So it's really up to you as an applicant. If you think that this review helps to endorse your work in a way that'll show the selection jury that your work aligns with the goals of the SEED Award, then I think it would be a really good thing to add, and it could really help to endorse your work in a way that maybe the other questions in the application form don't allow for. So I think it could be a really valuable addition to the application. So please feel free to upload it.
Mm-hmm. When do we consider the starting point of working with art?
Yeah, that's a great question. So because we use the word your professional career as an artist, I think maybe some people get confused that we're only looking for professional artists, but really you can be an amateur artist so long as you've sort of dedicated art as your professional career is when we decide the starting years of your career as an emerging artist. We don't count study years, and this may be good to highlight. So if you've been studying art, those years don't count, but really when you've decided to start a professional year as an artist is what we consider for that.
Yeah. Here a specific question about Chile. Maybe I can answer this one. So this is somebody who lives in South America, but Chile does not appear on the list of eligible countries. So due to the provenance of our funding, we use the OECD list of recipients, which is a list that has to do with GDP. Chile indeed does not appear on that list, which means also that we are not able to work in Chile at the moment. So hopefully this might change in the future, but for now, it's not one of the countries that we're able to work in. Here again, a question about the award money. So in the case one receives the award, how much time does it take for one to be able to use the money for their arts practice?
All right. So it's actually really up to you once you get the award money. Again, because the money is unearmarked, you can really decide what you would like to use the money for in terms of how you can elevate your art practice to the next level. And you can make the decision as to when to make that move and make that investment with the award. We don't put a time restriction on that.
Yeah. How do we determine artists who received little support. What do we have as a definition for little support?
Yeah, so this again is a slightly hazier part of our definitions. However, when we look at little support and little recognition, yeah, it's a little bit of a balancing act, because we look for who's had access to different platforms and different stages in life, but of course different forms of art and culture have different spaces in which they can exhibit themselves or receive awards for themselves. So, you know, for example, if you work in music, you might get exposure in a lot of festivals, or if you're a curator, you might be able to get a lot of exhibitions. It really varies between different fields. So it's very difficult to have a hard and fast rule for this. However, we really look at those who have had recognition locally, but also especially internationally, and weigh that up. And this is also an element of the application that we look at in regards to the pool of applications that we receive. So if we look at the pool of applicants and we see who's relatively gotten fewer opportunities to showcase themselves or fewer awards in relation to other applicants, then this is something that we also consider. So I would say for you yourself, if you think that you've gotten no recognition for your work, or very, very little, that you should consider yourself eligible in that regard and apply.
Mm-hmm. Lovely, thank you. So Ivana, whose question we just answered, didn't get the answer she expected, so maybe I can try and answer this question again. So this question is about what the award money can be spent on. So yes, we mentioned that it can't be spent on university tuition, but basically the award is an unearmarked grant, which means that it can be spent on materials or studio space or project budgets. I mean, it's really very broad in that sense. It's hard to give you a specific answer without knowing exactly what your work is. Yeah. But the award is really meant as a sort of an investment in the creative practice, right? So anything that's directly linked to that creative practice would be eligible as a spending. I hope that does answer. Why should I send a report after receiving the money for the expenses I spent from the grant? This is a question from Mohammed.
All right. So actually, I would say that our reporting is quite friendly in that we don't ask anyone to keep receipts of what they've spent the money on paper trails in any form. I would actually call our reporting a little bit more of a review. So a year after you receive your Seed Award, our monitoring and evaluation team will get into contact with you, and they will ask you to submit a report, which is really a little bit more survey style, and the questions are a lot more qualitative than quantitative, and we really just want to get an understanding of the impact that the award has had. Things like, have you gotten different opportunities since having the award? It's really for us to understand and measure the impact, as opposed to asking you to be accountable for how you used the award or spent the grant.
Yeah. Let me see. Here's quite a specific question from Vidushi. I'm currently working on mental illness and how people affected by it are perceived in society. Is this eligible considering it's not entirely cultural, but more inclined towards social issues?
Yes. I would definitely say it's eligible, because we are looking for artists who are working with social and political issues in their context. If a thematic that you're working on isn't in our drop-down list, we do have another option, and we really encourage people to use it, because the thematics that we have listed are really limited to the thematics that we just see more regularly, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have the broad definition of every thematic. And we really love to get applications with thematics that we haven't listed. It's always really exciting. So please feel free to add that.
Yeah. Another few questions about eligibility. So I was once part of a local residency funded by the Prince Claus. Many artists were selected. The funding was given to the organization, but not the artists. Am I eligible to apply for a Seed Award?
Yes. So as I mentioned, only those who've received awards in the past are ineligible. If you've received a project grant, you are still eligible to apply. And obviously as an individual, since the Seed Awards are for individual artists and their artistic career development.
Okay, perfect. Then from Sasha K, can you please explain the social and political themes question and how we go about answering this if it's more than 2?
All right. So I believe when you are in the application form and you're selecting the themes that you work with, you are able to select more than one. So please feel free to add all of the themes that you work on. We love multi-thematic and multidisciplinary work. You can also explain in your answers to the questions how these social and political themes intersect. And as I said, when giving the tips and tricks onto what a good application entails, also really link these social and political themes back to your local context so we can see how this affects the environment around you and how your work is responding to that.
Yeah, thank you. Another question about the questions from John Peters. How do I address the question that asks how the political and social themes you address through your work are relevant to your context?
All right, so I would say that if you look at these themes, I'm sure the reason you're engaging with them in your context is because there is some sort of urgency or some sort of need for you to address them because of the way that they interact with your local context. So if you look at these broader themes, that might be very general things like racial justice or Indigenous rights, you can then look at how these are mirrored in the society or the context around you. So you can maybe find little examples of how this pops up. And really give us an idea of how this comes into play around you, and then go the step further and show how this then interacts or intersects with your work.
Thanks, Emma. Here, a question about actually data security. Maybe I can answer this one. What do you do with the videos that people submit as their pitches after selection? So being based in Amsterdam, we comply with the EU data regulations, which means that after a few years, we need to delete everything that we've received from you. In terms of who we share this information with, the only people outside of our organization that get to see anything that's in the applications is the group of external advisors who helps us in the selection process. These are all people that we work with and who have non-disclosure agreements with us and a confidentiality clause. So we really do treat everything that we receive with sensitivity. I hope that answers your question.
Maybe it's good to add that on the login page to your application form, the privacy rules and regulations that we abide by are listed there, so you can also read them.
Let's see, we have another few questions about the recommendation letters. So let's see, who should write our recommendation letter? Does it have to be somebody working in a relevant institution? What makes a person eligible for writing the recommendation?
Yeah, so really all that makes them eligible is that they know you and your work. We really don't look for like celebrity names or anything or celebrity institutions when it comes to the recommendation letter. It is just nice to know where this person works, so that we can get an idea of how they know you and how you know each other and how they can attest to your work. But so yeah, as long as they provide an explanation of how they know you, we don't really mind who this person is.
Let's see, can the award be used toward participation in a workshop meant to lead to the production of a photo book, for example? This is a question from Hadi.
Yes, so that's definitely something that would be eligible for the award. I'm not sure if it's a personal photo book or a collective one, but I would just highlight that if it is part of collective work, that is also still eligible, but maybe it would be really good to motivate in your application how working towards this collective group or this collective project will also enhance your career as an individual artist or cultural practitioner.
Perfect. Now another question about the supporting materials. Can they also be sent as a portfolio, meaning just one file with all the supporting materials?
Yes. So in the supporting materials field, you have to submit a minimum of one document or one file. And if that's a portfolio that contains all the visual images of everything that your work entails, then that's even easier for us. So that's great.
Perfect. And now a couple of questions about the video pitch. So a few people have asked if what we mean by be creative, and if it has to be like a headshot, or if they can intercut with images, videos, or if they can also be like super crazy with the format.
Yeah, so I think Be Creative actually answers these extra little snippets that Tessa's just shared. It means that you don't necessarily have to be standing in front of a camera like I am now, just talking about yourself, although that is really nice and it is also really welcome. But you can feel free to add music, add images, not video yourself at all, create something visual that's completely separate to yourself. You really have a free reign to do so, and it's a nice way either for us to get to know your face and your talking voice, or to get to know your work from a different perspective. And something that I think Be Creative also means is that we ask quite a few questions in the application, which we have answers for, but this is really your moment to share information with us that we haven't asked for in the application and that we can't get from the rest of your application form. So it's really an opportunity to inject extra content or extra material, or just extra highlighting of what makes you special.
Yeah, wonderful. Maybe a question that kind of links into that about the more portfolios. Can they be transmedia, for example, mixing photography with video?
Yes, I think that sounds really exciting, and I think we'd encourage a portfolio like that.
Yeah. Right, so here from Cecilia, a question about the project. Can my specific project change during the working process, i.e. after receiving the grant, but still be on the themes that I work with?
Yes, so that's all right. In your application form, we do ask for an indication of what you will spend the Seed Award money on and what you'll focus. And again, when contracting, we'll check this with you again. However, if your project does change in the course of, after you receive the money, I think that's really realistic, considering the way that the world works, and we are completely understanding of that. So yeah, that's completely fine, as long as it still aligns with your artistic practice and career.
Yeah. Here, a follow-up from the pitch from Natasha asking if it can be an audio. It can. It doesn't have to be video. So if you prefer to send in an audio, for example, we have sometimes people really working in like audio arts and sonic arts, then audio is absolutely fine. Okay, another one about the supporting materials, Emma. Can they be composed into a website and sent like that?
Yes, there's also a link option in the supporting materials section, so you can submit a website link there. However, also note that a little bit earlier on in the application form, if you have a personal website, you can also put the link to that website in another part of the application. So if you have a website and also very many other supporting materials, then that might free up a little bit more space in the supporting material section for you to add something extra.
Perfect. Then another specific question about the recommendation letter. Who does it specifically need to be addressed to?
Yeah, so that's not super strict. Of course, you can address it to the Prince Claus Fund, or you can just address it to hi people. That's not necessarily something that we will penalize you for.
Yeah, perfect. From Divya, what constitutes a professional practice? If I've been working on my artistic practice, but I never earned money through it, is that considered?
Yes, we understand that the art world can be very precarious, and as long as you consider yourself professionally engaged with your art, we would consider that a professional practice as well. We would just ask for you to make that clear in your application and through the supporting materials that you provide. So you don't necessarily need to show works that have been exhibited somewhere or shared in a public space, but give a good portfolio of the artistic work that you have been creating and engaging with yourself.
Yeah, wonderful. Right. Okay, a bit of a general question, but I think probably quite good for everybody here. What do we look for in an application? From Siababa?
That is a good question. So, I mean, first we ask that they meet all the eligibility criteria, so that it is really an emerging artist, ideally in the first 5 years of their career, with little to no recognition for their artistic work, and whose work really engages with the social and political themes around them. Mm-hmm. We really look for artists who I would say have an inspiring practice, but that also sounds really generic, but whose practice is, I suppose, not only for them, but as we said, looking around at what's their local context is calling for and asking for, and responding to that through their art practice. Mm-hmm. So that's something that always really stands out. And if you can motivate that, then that's something that we've seen in past that's really well responded to in applications.
Yeah. And maybe I can add personality as well. We really want to figure out who, get to know who you are a bit more. And we see the applications that show more of the reasons why and how you're doing your work are often the ones who do better also with the external advisors that we have. Yeah. So don't shy away from.
No.
Okay, here another question about the context question. Do we have to answer the context questions within the project we hope to do or our previous projects?
So again, I would say that's up to you and how you think you are framing your application in order to show its eligibility and its alignment with the goals of the Seed Award. If you want to include things about your previous work, that's perfectly fine. And if you want to focus on that, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, we don't really have a preference in terms of that. It would be nice to know what you are working on. I can just say it for myself. Mm-hmm. But it's really up to you to decide what proportions to share in terms of that information.
Yeah. Then we have a couple of people asking if they can outsource some of the work once they've received the award. So for example, if they'll be able to pay people working with the grant for material, who are working with them on the project.
Yeah. Of course, if you are awarded the grant, you can use the grant money to pay collaborators or people who are helping you in realizing your art projects or your artwork. Again, I would say make sure to really make it clear how investing the money in paying these people or outsourcing various forms of labor will help enhance your career and your trajectory as an artist.
Perfect. Can supporting materials and portfolio be different?
Yes, they can be different. I think they are different. However, I would also say that portfolio is a subset of supporting materials. So you would upload your portfolio to that section of the application. However, that doesn't need to be the only supporting material, right? You can also have other forms, whether they be links or images or audio files. So you can treat them differently, but they are submitted in the same part of the application.
Yeah. Maybe to follow up on that question, do you look at what stage the project is in? So would it help to have more supporting materials?
So we obviously do look at it because we are assessing the application, but it's not something that would make one project be chosen over another project. If you are at more of the stage of a conception of a project, then I would say that you could use the supporting materials to balance that by showing other works that you've done, just so that we get an impression of the type of work that you create as an artist. However, if you are doing an ongoing project, it would be really nice, and I think satisfy our curiosities if we saw maybe some of the work that you put into that project. So it's really about the story that you want to tell with the project that you're pitching with, or with the work that you are coming to us with, to use these supporting materials really to enhance what you're applying for.
Mm-hmm. And a few more about the project. Should I mention or detail my project in the pitch?
Yes, you definitely can. But as I've said before, this is really a nice opportunity for us to get to know you and for you to highlight certain things that haven't been mentioned in the application. So I would almost suggest maybe thinking a little bit more about what extra information you can give us within that pitch video. And really, I mean, the question is what drives you as an artist. So I imagine your project is a huge part of that. But if there's other elements that are maybe more personal or relate to different parts of your work that you can convey in answering that pitch, then I think that would also be very exciting to receive.
Mm-hmm. What part of the application is the most important part or has the most weight for making a decision?
Well, this is a question I've never had before. I think it's probably different for everyone. We do look at the applications in absolute entirety. So it's not that one part is not looked at or one part is looked at more. However, I would say that the parts that really help make a decision, if maybe you're balancing between two candidates, because I'll also add that oftentimes we have more really eligible candidates that we have space to give awards for. So then you are really comparing apples and pears, but they're equally as sweet. So in that case, I would say that the pitch video is really a nice way for us to, get to know you as an artist as well, and also really getting the idea of the motivation as to why you believe this career the Seed Award will help the next stage in your career, and motivating why you need to take the step and how the award will help you take the step. I think having that clear is something that really helps.
Mm-hmm. Can the grant money be combined with and used to support grants or residencies sponsored by other organizations as well?
Yes, so if you're getting this award in conjunction with other funding opportunities, and that makes you even more able to advance your career, get a residency or something like that, then we're really happy to be part of that pie.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, is it possible to apply with the same project that people submitted last year to the call?
Yes, so maybe it's good also just generally to say that if you applied for a Seed Award last year and weren't granted the Seed Award, we definitely encourage you to apply again. As I just said, we get so many wonderful candidates and we don't always have the space to give them all the awards. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you weren't eligible. It just maybe meant that last year wasn't the lucky one. So if you applied last year and you used a specific project and it didn't get the funding, you're very welcome to apply with that again this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we have a few questions about the selection process.
Yeah.
So do we balance culture and ethnicity to balance participants from different parts of the world? This is a question from Odisana.
All right. So with the selection process, we do have a balance in terms of geographical range that we try to make sure that there isn't a skew more so between regions than countries. So that's something that we do think about in the application, and maybe sometimes sways a decision in the application process. However, it's never so much that becomes the initial lens at which we look at the application. We really look for the eligible and strong applications first, and if we balance later, it's really at the end of the process.
Yeah, perfect. Could you outline the timeline of the selection process?
Yes. So as you see on the screen now, the deadline for the process is on the deadline for your application is on the 23rd of February, so at the 23rd of this month. Thereafter, we need to share the applications with our external jury, and they give us feedback before the final selection is made, which, as you can imagine, with everyone all over the world, it does take a little bit of time, especially with the amount of applications that we get. So ultimately, everyone will be informed about the results of their application by August. And if you are selected to be a Seed Award, then we'll be making the announcement of the application as well as handling your contracting in September.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then a question about our disciplines again. From an anonymous person, I have seen more visual artists and designers getting selected in the past couple of years for the award and not many writers. Why is that?
Well,
keeping a
I'm
sharp.
not entirely sure of the numbers of who we supported, like off my head. But we also, as I said, when we tried to balance things in terms of geography, disciplines is also something that we really try to look at in our balancing. And we really do try to balance that. So if you've seen more visual artists and photographers, that might also be because we have mentorships that are geared towards photography. So some other awards go to photographers and visual artists, but we really do encourage applicants from across the board of art. And we love getting those entries with practices that we don't see so often. And we really do try to balance those in the final selection. So please don't be put off if you've seen more visual artists or any other type of art in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would also add that it's the one discipline that's probably less visual or less visible on our social medias, because obviously it doesn't always come with like the images to be sharing as well. Let's see, another few sort of questions. I think we're coming more or less to the end of the time that we have. Is it a problem if I don't have supporting materials apart from my portfolio?
No, that's not a problem. We ask for a minimum of 1 supporting material. So if you just submit a portfolio, I would say that that's definitely more than enough, because I'm guessing that that also contains very many supporting materials within it. So definitely feel free to just submit a portfolio.
Then in terms of eligibility of spending costs, again, there's 2 people, one person asking if it can be spent on working premises and the other one on a film, making a film. Yeah.
So I would say both of those are eligible options. Really, when you're looking at what you want to use the money for, we just encourage you to look at your artistic career and think, what do I need to take the next step? And you can dream big on that, and whatever it is within that artistic field that you need to take the next step, so long as it's not education fees, then please feel free to think and assume that that's eligible.
Yeah. Right, so there's only a few questions that we haven't answered yet. I'm going to try and bulk them, and then I'm afraid we're going to have to end the session. How many applications have we received in the past, and what is our process in terms of giving people feedback on their applications?
All right. So in the past 2 years, we've received over 1,000 applications, and a few hundreds over 1,000 for the Seed Awards. We anticipate it'll be roughly the same this year, but it's hard to tell already. And sorry, what was the second part of the question?
What our regulations are in providing feedback on applications.
Oh yeah, so we are unable to provide everyone individual feedback, as you can imagine, with 1,000 applications, but we do collect general feedback from the applications we receive, and we will send an email with general feedback that we've seen from the group of applicants. If you have specific questions, really, you can always message us, but I think in the most case, the questions that you'll have will be covered within that general feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right, here again, a few questions about the medium and disciplines. So a few people are asking if they can use multiple disciplines in their application, and if that would weaken their eligibility.
That definitely wouldn't. Yeah, it wouldn't. We treat all disciplines and also multidiscipline applications on the exact same playing field. And if you have a multidisciplinary practice, we really encourage you to still apply and to also share the different disciplines within the application. Don't feel that you need to shy away from telling us about all the things that you're juggling in terms of disciplines. I think it's always quite exciting to see what people are capable of as well.
Perfect. Right, okay, last question. What's the difference between portfolio and supporting material, and can we send more than a single recommendation letter? Yeah. So as I said a little bit earlier, I think a portfolio can be considered as part of under the umbrella of supporting material. If the portfolio is your only piece of supporting material, that's also perfectly fine, as many portfolios often contain a lot of supporting material within them. Mm-hmm. And sorry, I forgot the second part of the question again. About the reference letter, sorry. Yeah, multiple reference letters.
If you do have a second reference letter, it's not required, but that's also perfectly fine. And you can feel free to submit that also in the supporting material part of your application.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Emma. So I think we've come to the end of this session now. We've been here for an hour. We've also answered a total of 141 questions, which is nice to see you all engaging like this. If your questions haven't been answered in this session, please do email us at awards@princeclausfund.nl. You can find the email address here. And check out the FAQ that we have on our website. We're always happy to answer any questions, and especially for more specific cases, we can imagine that sometimes it's nice to get a bit of reassurance. So don't shy away from reaching out. Yeah, and then I think that's everything from us. We wish you all a super nice day and best of luck with all your applications, guys.
Yeah.